very much for this fantastic intro, and it's kind of hard to pass after these two speakers. I'm going to set up my technology so that way I actually know what I'm talking about. So let's get started right away. I'm a local, born here in Montreal, raised from African immigrant parents who came here many years ago. My parents landed in Halifax at Pier 21, where at the time that's where immigrants arrived in Canada. It was January 15th, 1968. And they were amongst the last ones to arrive in Canada by boat. They arrived at the dead of winter. It was their first experience. They grew up in the sunshine in a country where Canadian winters is only seen in books. When they got off the boat and they saw that snow, the thrill of seeing something quickly was overtaken by the minus 33 degrees centigrade that day. They did not have any winter boots, they didn't have any winter coats, they did not have any gloves, nor any winter hats. Instead, my mom was wearing sandals. My dad had a suit and a tie. He showed me pictures. And nothing prepared them for the journey they were about to embark. My parents came to Canada with two of my siblings who never witnessed a Canadian winter to start their life. I question their decision often. I ask myself how much I admire this kind of leap, this leap of courage, their tenacity to achieve their goals. I sometimes think of whether or not I would have had the same courage as my parents to stay and live in this sort of winter wonderland, if you'd like to call it that, or simply turn back and go back to the home country. When I was a boy, my father asked me often this question. He asked me if I was interested in achieving my goals. I always found this question so odd. Why would he ask me this question of whether I'm interested in achieving my goals? Of course I'm interested. Look around this room. We're all interested in achieving our goals. Each and every one of you. All of you attending university, thinking about your next moves, getting prepared for your professional lives. Of course we're interested. We're all interested in achieving these goals. But why would my father keep asking me if I was interested? I saw my parents work hard doing various jobs, trying various ways to improve their lives and that of my siblings and me. I watched them try different entrepreneurial ventures, and I also watched them fail. Did that mean they were not interested? My parents were news junkies. So we spent our dinners talking about what was happening in the world. From wars, elections, national budgets, education policy, military intervention. It's very exciting stuff for a 10-year-old sitting at the dinner table, I'll tell you that. It made me quickly realize that we're not alone in this world. It also gave me an intense fascination for geography. It allowed me to explore where all these issues were arising, that we were discussing almost every day. In elementary and high school, I simply did not excel. I wasn't the best student. I wasn't very interested in school. I struggled to pass the grades. I kept moving forward, but I always had difficulty, and I basically preferred to spend my time reading about events, places, about history. My discussions around the dinner table gave me an appetite for current world events. But indeed, I needed to understand them first, so I spent the time in the library. Actually, I was a kind of a bookworm, researching, reading about what was happening in the world. I knew that my parents are going to quiz me. Did you see what happened today in the news? Yeah, I'm ready. But the other thing we also spoke about was football, soccer. For those that you're familiar with the sport, growing up, I wanted to be that footballer. I wanted to be a soccer player that would go on the pitch and hear his name screamed out by all these people in the stands. That was my thing. I always wanted to say I was going to go out to that field and everyone was going to scream out my name, and that was going to be me. It became a very great obsession of mine. When the World Cup came calling every 4 years, my dad and I, we were glued to the small screen watching the games, watching the countries compete, and it was so exciting to watch the African teams beat the European strongholds. It was wonderful. I still remember Roger Mila. Being interested, was obvious. It was obvious to me that I was interested. I was interested in succeeding. My dad kept asking me this question as I kept progressing in life. Clearly, I was going to make it. I was going to become a footballer. That was clear in my mind. But my stumbling block was my education. I wasn't a strong student, so I had to find my interest in school in order to get my parents off my back, so that way they can let me pursue playing football. In high school, I discovered my first economics and political science classes. These were easy. I knew the answers, I knew the debates, I knew the politics of these regions. I even understood developmental economics. We spoke about it at the dinner table, because I understood what a country's strategy was about. And of course, I would understand that every country had an economic interest of reaching the World Cup, because of the economic upswing participation means. Even though I had parents who encouraged me to pursue more pragmatic professions than footballing, I was often guided towards the sciences, engineering, medicine, law, but to no avail. I simply did not have the interest in any of these streams. I eventually realized that becoming a footballer, you had to play the game. So instead of playing, I read about it. I read about it and I watched it on TV, and I really, really enjoyed watching these games. After I accepted the cold reality that I wasn't going to become a footballer, I had to embark on an academic career and focusing on the topics that was of interest to me. I grew up talking about politics, about economics, so naturally that's where I pursued. So I do have some insecurities. I was surrounded by those who kept reminding me that a good, honorable profession would give me a financial stability to enjoy life and not work as hard as my immigrant parents. I tried my hand in the sciences, but I failed. I failed physics, I failed chemistry. Finally, wanted to put my knowledge at hand, I decided to take a gap year between Cégep and university, and I decided to travel. As a good Canadian, I took my backpack, I sewed a Canadian flag on the back, and I landed in London, England, with my backpack. From there, I started traveling throughout Europe. I went to see so many football games I can't even begin to describe to you. I worked in odd jobs. I prepared pizza in Milan, which was actually a lot of fun. And I finally found myself landing in Tel Aviv 4 days before war broke out. And this was in 1991. You can imagine what was going through my mind. Wow. I'm here in a country I heard and read so much about. But I was in the middle of a war zone. War broke up, and I was stuck. And I called the Canadian embassy, and I said, "Hi, I'm in trouble." They said, "What's wrong?" "I need to get out." And they said, "Well, all the borders are closed. It's war. There's no flights in, there's no flights out. You have to stay." So I stayed. I figured it out. I stayed in the country. I survived. And I ended up staying there, finding work. And I found work on a cruise ship after the war. I came back to Canada knowing fully well what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, or at least I knew that my interest lied in international business. This catch-all phrase was repeated to me so many times. Import-export. I had built an interesting network way before LinkedIn started operating. I had learned a couple of languages along the way. Why not then just specialize in this field? Traveling, seeing the world. My interest was at a peak. So I embarked in a BCom at Concordia, and of course I took a minor in political science. Why not never stray too far away from what's familiar? And by the time I was ready to graduate, I decided to go on an international exchange, and I landed in Nice, France. I continued my studies into an internship with the airport de Nice and started working at the marketing department. What is very important here is that this occurred before the age of Google. And my Google was a very small library. It was a resource library stacked with newspapers and with all kinds of different books that were literally falling off the shelves. And I taught myself some very key words that I'm sure none of your classes are teaching you, which is internship, informational interviews, networking, cover letters, CVs. I used these keywords and read books such as What Color is Your Parachute, Knock 'em Dead cover letters, and I used this newfound knowledge to apply for internships and speak to alumni from around the world. I was never afraid to pick up the phone to call someone to speak to them. While I was in Nice, I met these two Americans who spoke to me about graduate school. Surely you're going to do an MBA, right, Albert? Of course, I retorted. Of course. Who doesn't do graduate school? Well, this was a wake-up call because I was kind of just hoping to stop school at that point and just go out there and work. Instead, I applied to a school. They mentioned to me, we had a really nice conversation, and this school was based in Bologna, Italy, and it specialized in international development. And through my research, I had seen a very high number of graduates from that school who started working at the World Bank. And so here I went from the conservative business stream to this kind of left-leaning, hand-dirtying life of international development. I applied and was accepted to Johns Hopkins University in Italy, and I spent my first year of a 2-year MA program in international economics in the city considered the culinary capital of Italy, right in the middle of an election year. Interesting, to say the least. I kept up my networking and my cold calling, and let me tell you that cold calling is probably the most difficult thing you will ever do in your life. There is nothing in this world that is tougher than this, and I kid you not. It's hard because the rejection is just such a high number of rejection. It's so hard to accept so many people to tell you no, or to hang up on you, or to just say, "Why are you calling me? Where'd you get my number?" But true to my father's words, I was interested in this field, and I had to persist to getting to where I was going. Still not sure where that was, but I knew, the general direction. I knew where that was. I continued my studies into going to Washington, D.C., and found again my insecure side visiting me quite often. Students around me kept talking to me about investment banking and the glories of the trade. And I got on the phone, again, just picking up the phone, cold calling, and calling alumni. And I found one alumni in New York City. And I called him up. I said, "Hi, my name is Albert. I'd like to talk to you about your field. Can you spare a few moments?" And he said, "Of course. If you're interested, I can spare the time." So he spoke to me about 30 minutes without really getting me a word in edgewise. He just kept on talking literally for 30 minutes straight about himself and about himself and about himself again. And he concluded with himself. And I immediately after this conversation, he said, "Albert, this is a great conversation. Maybe you should come up to New York and visit us." It's great. Of course I'm going to come up to New York. So I booked my coach ticket on this Peter Pan bus. For those of you who know it, it's this smelly milk run of a bus that leaves Washington, D.C. at midnight, and it gets to 42nd Street the following morning. And I got there at 6 a.m., and I rushed down to the World Trade Center and waited there until 8:15 and called him up and said, "Hi, John, I just arrived." And so we spent the entire day meeting analysts. I met the analysts, and I started talking about their jobs, and I finished the day with meeting one of the partners. By the time I walked out of there, I got a job offer. I got a job offer to work for Lehman Brothers in New York City, World Trade Center. That's $80,000 US 20 years ago with a bonus base of 2 times the base salary. That was great. That was an incredible feeling. But I went home over the holidays and I was moping around the house, only to have my mom ask me, "What's up?" I said, I kind of got a job." She goes, "Okay, congratulations, I guess." I was the first of my cohorts to get a job offer. She asked me, "What's the problem? Are you not interested in this job?" "I am. I'm very interested in this job. Why would I not be interested? Then why would I have applied? Did you ask him what he does all day? My mother asked me. That's a good question. No, I didn't. So I headed back to Washington, D.C. It was the first week of January. I picked up the phone. I called up John. And I said, "Hi, John, it's Albert." "Yeah, what's up?" I said, "What do you do all day?" He answered me, "I'm always here by 7 a.m. and I never leave before 11. I said, "Well, what about your weekends?" "So what about them?" "I work." "What about your wife? What does she feel about that?" She understands." At that very moment, at that precise moment, something cracked. I heard a cracking noise in my mind. And I responded, "I'm not sure this is for me." Ladies and gentlemen, I experienced the deadliest 7 seconds of my life. A total silence on the other end of the phone. Just waiting. And John said to me, "No one says no to Lehman Brothers." And he hung up. Bye-bye big money job. You're talking about moping around the house? I moped around the campus for at least a couple of weeks. And I took on all that verbal abuse from all the other students who everyone, knew, hey, that's the guy who said no. Yeah, that was me. And they said to me, I remember one of them saying, "Albert, you're a loser. You can't say no to Lehman Brothers. Are you crazy, man?" Was I not interested in succeeding? Did this persistent question come back to my life to test me? I ended up finding an internship 1 month later at the World Bank Technical Department, working on microlending. My salary, $0. My job was to analyze policy initiatives to encourage French-speaking countries to implement micro-lending programs to females. I was in Togo, Lomé, where I came across a lady that was not able to get a loan because she was illiterate and a widow with 6 kids. No way for her to sustain herself, let alone pay back any bank loans. All the banks rejected her. But she had 2 very important ingredients. She had a will to succeed. And she also had an excellent location of where she was living. And she had an idea. She says, "This is a very busy street corner. I'm going to make homemade sandwiches and fresh juices and sell it to the people passing by." She needed 5,000 CFA. That's the local currency. That's the exact equivalence to $10 US. $10 US is all she needed, and not one bank wanted to give it to her. So we designed a project to lend her the money and offer her the skills to succeed in her business. 6 months later, she paid back her loan. She created a self-sustaining business for her and her kids. That was it. I finally found what I was interested in. I found my calling. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not ashamed to tell you that I have failed 13 times. Failed in business, I failed in academia, I failed in personal life. Some of you might think that the number 13 is unlucky. But for me, it proved to be a very important turning point in my life. Because it's at this precise moment that I finally realized that being interested in succeeding was not the right approach to reaching my goals. I had to be committed. You see, if you're interested, then you will go about your life accepting your fate when you encounter defeat. You will accept your fate when you encounter deception, deceit, and failure. But a commitment is different. By committing myself to achieving my goals, I realized that I was not able to accept defeat. I was not able to accept deception, deceitness, nor was I willing to accept failure. It took me 13 failures to finally realize that my commitment level was not at the height of achieving my goals. Was this what my dad was referring to? Was it commitment or interest? My parents taught me a very valuable lesson in life in that in order to be successful, you had to commit yourself to achieving what you wanted to reach. I could have stopped after 2 or 3 failures. But I was committed to reaching a career that I wanted to reach. I was blinded by my failures. I ignored all the negative, all the put-downs, all the criticisms, only to keep moving forward to reaching what I wanted to reach. During this entire time, I became a professional soccer referee. I finally did achieve my goal of being in a stadium filled with fans screaming my name. Except they were not praising me. They were rather insulting me. But I reached my goal. And that's really the most important part. By 2009, I had become an international professional referee, and I was in Etihad Stadium in Manchester, England, at the center of the field as main referee for England versus Switzerland. I will never forget this day for as long as I live. I reached my goal. Today, I have taken my training as an economist, my experience working in international development, and my love of the game, and I created the largest corporate soccer league in Canada with over 10,000 players, 300 companies, and that's just here in Montreal. And I took it one step further, and I created the International Federation of Corporate Football, which is the world governing body of corporate football. And over the past 10 years, I have expanded this organization, reaching 56 countries around the world. We have access to 2.5 million soccer players. And corporate soccer is what? It's people working every day in their jobs. And once a week, you leave your job and you come play soccer. And you represent your company. And of course, you get some exercise. Yes, Dad, I'm interested in succeeding. But I'm also committed in reaching my goals. And as all of you embark on your journey to travel and to reach exciting adventures, I remind all of you that only your commitment levels will determine how far you will reach your goals. Thank you very much.